Welcome to the channel, where we delve into the mind of a villain. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Ernst Stavro Blofeld from the James Bond films Spectre and its sequel, No Time to Die. Over the course of the franchise 50 years, there have been several iterations of the character, but none with as much focus and backstory as the one portrayed by Christoph Waltz. However, despite his pre-existing title as Bond's arch-nemesis, Blofeld falls short of that reputation and finds his place as one of the more unmemorable Bond villains. Much of his villainy is retconned by retroactively labeling him as the author of all of Bond's pain. While this is convenient, it comes across as lazy and slipshod, and takes away from the credence of the character. Nevertheless, there are some characteristics and beliefs that we can glean from his actions. Blofeld's first appearance on screen quickly reveals one of his traits, his inclination towards theatrics. We initially encounter him during a secret Spectre meeting held in the fictional Palazzo Cadenza in Rome, Italy. Blofeld's choice of such a meeting location, rife with Baroque-style architecture, and the way he plans his entrance gives off a sense of showmanship. The place is dimly lit, and from the perspective of the participants, Blofeld's face is concealed with a veil of darkness to add to his mystique. The vast majority of the participants don't actually need to be there. Rather, they're just there for show, to fill up the hall with somber faces for Blofeld's stage. This tendency toward theatrics is again seen later at his base in Morocco, when he suddenly dims the lights midway during conversation and has everyone turn to face him in the darkness as he resumes his monologue. Not unlike an actor on the classical stage with the spotlight shined on him. For a final example, this is seen once more in No Time to Die, at the secret Spectre meeting in Cuba. Although Blofeld isn't physically there, his bionic eye is set on a cushion and panned from left to right, almost as if they were treating it as royalty. When Blofeld arrives at the palazzo, everyone stops speaking and a wave of silence envelops the place. Blofeld then does something insignificant but reveals much of his character. He doesn't speak as he feels the microphone is too far away, but rather than simply shifting it a few inches himself, he signals for his man to come over and makes him pull the microphone nearer before he speaks. It's almost as if Blofeld was saying, "I don't fix your mistake, you fix it yourself." No task is too small for him to delegate. His presence alone noticeably ups the level of tension in the atmosphere considerably, as seen by how the woman stammers when he tells them to continue. The meeting then reaches the topic of who should be given the assignment to eliminate Mr. White. This Spectre operative volunteers for the role, but what's noticeable is his body language and his facial expression, which conveys a sense of irreverence. This may or may not be true, but it's suggestible that Blofeld, by offering others a chance to challenge the irreverent operative, was his act of punishing him for his disrespectful attitude, one that cost him his eyes. Blofeld then carries on the meeting as if he was speaking to the entire audience, but then suddenly transitions into his greeting to welcome James. At this point, Bond realizes the meeting was a trap, but it is unclear what Blofeld's motivations are. If his aim was to capture or kill Bond, it was a poor attempt as seen by how little security he sends to apprehend him. One can only assume that Blofeld was just setting this up for a dramatic reveal, with his face unveiled from the dark no less, only to let Bond get away so that he could have a more satisfying revenge later. But when Blofeld's face was revealed, we get a glimpse of the main attribute that Christoph Waltz brings to the role. It's the signature grin he carries, the mischievous, conniving-looking grin, together with the devious eyes that have become a trademark of the actor, making him an excellent fit for playing a villain, especially one as diabolical as Blofeld. Blofeld is a villain who is completely void of morals, as seen by the long list of illegal activities that his company spearheads. Back in the 60s, the comical Spectre was an organization that represented the political state of the Cold War. But in modern times, the organization has been updated to become one with the chief aim of global surveillance to disrupt the balance of power. The octopus, the animal symbol of the organization, while it gives off a sinister vibe, represents its structure, with Blofeld being the head and its tentacles being its subsidiaries. Blofeld's evil is demonstrated by his comparison to another existing Bond villain, Mr. White, who himself has committed some heinous crimes. Most notably, he was partially responsible for the death of Vesper Lynd. However, even someone as evil as Mr. White would eventually disagree with the direction that Spectre was headed in, specifically in their targeting of women and children. In response, Blofeld gives him the death sentence and executes him by thallium poisoning. In a later scene, Blofeld mentions to Madeline that her father was weak, with his choice of words revealing that he deems having morality as a flaw. Blofeld's next appearance would be at his desert base in Morocco, where, like all stereotypical Bond villains, he describes his master plan in detail. But Blofeld isn't doing this just to fit the stereotypical mold. In reality, it's a product of his sadism, and he cannot let Bond die until he has first suffered enough to appease him. A quick death would be too easy a punishment. For this reason, he accommodates Bond into his own hotel room before showing him a tour around the facility, only to have him strapped to a chair for torture later. As it turns out, the film introduces the new twist that Blofeld was actually Franz Obenhauser, whose father took Bond in after he was orphaned, making them surrogate brothers. Or in other words, Blofeld was effectively Brofeld. This twist does have the potential for much backstory and development, but unfortunately it's not explored sufficiently to have much significance. In his youth, Blofeld became jealous of Bond when his father started to give him more attention than him. He considered it a rejection from his father and equates James to a cuckoo bird, one who displaces other birds from their nests. It reached the point where, in his resentment, he killed his father in an avalanche and led everyone to believe that he himself was dead. Blofeld's story might appear simple at the outset, but the pain of rejection from a parent cannot be overstated, especially when the parent's affection is given to someone not from the family. It doesn't justify his behavior, but it's certainly a route to evil, as we see with other villains like Commodus from Gladiator or Harry Osborn from the Spider-Man films. As mentioned earlier, Blofeld has one purpose for James: to watch him suffer, and to have that suffering resemble his own as much as possible. In other words, an eye for an eye. Coincidentally, Blofeld would lose an eye due to Bond's actions, but he does not seek any retribution in that regard. Since Bond does not have any parental figures remaining, Blofeld would naturally target the only objection of affection left. He does this by showing Madeline the final moments of her father's death, and that it was Bond who enabled his passing. When that doesn't work, Blofeld proceeds to try from Bond's angle instead, using a drill to target his memory functions so that Madeline would essentially become a stranger to him. Throughout Bond's ordeal, Blofeld is remarkably calm and casual, as if he was a surgeon simply on another day on the job. Blofeld's sadism is further seen by how much he enjoys himself throughout his acts. It's all fun and games to him. When he threatens Bond with Madeline's life, he playfully draws a heart onto the fog glass. And right before he leaves Bond with the choice to save himself or her, he shows his psychosis when he suddenly bursts out in laughter. Despite being incarcerated, Blofeld would still continue his revenge by sowing discord between Bond and Madeline and causing their separation. He finds joy in depriving Bond of the life he could have had, and in his own words, giving Bond an empty world like the one he gave him. But in his celebration of his achievement, Blofeld undoes his efforts by reconciling Bond and Madeline. That is the price of reveling in his victory. Perhaps it's fitting that Blofeld would reap what he sowed, that his past sins would come back to haunt him as he sits powerless in a cell watching his organization die. But it makes for an unmemorable legacy when the supposed greatest Bond villain is killed off accidentally with little impact. So what do you think of Blofeld as played by Christoph Waltz, folks? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care.